Every single one of them had a chance to get away, and none of them did. Tonight, we're going inside 5 cases that have haunted investigators, families, and entire cities for decades. A killer who promised jazz would save your life and almost kept his word. A family slaughtered in a cabin while their kids slept 10 feet away. America's first known serial killer who built an entire hotel designed to make people disappear. A dead man on a beach with no name, no past, and a message in a dead language. And 2 teenage girls on a hiking trail, one of whom filmed her own killer. These are not cold cases that were quietly filed away. These are open wounds. Let's start in New Orleans, March 1918. The city was already on edge. The war was still going. Spanish flu was weeks away from killing millions. And then on the night of May 23rd, a grocer named Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine were found in their bedroom, skulls caved in with an axe. The axe belonged to Maggio. The killer had taken it from the shed, used it, and left it in the backyard. The back door had been chiseled open from the outside. Over the next 16 months, the axeman struck at least 8 more times. The victims were almost exclusively Italian immigrant grocers and their families. He always entered through a chiseled door panel. He always used the victim's own axe. And he almost always left survivors. People who woke up covered in blood next to a dead spouse, or children who slept through it entirely. Investigators had nothing, no prints, no witnesses who could describe him, no motive that made any sense. Then on March 13th, 1919, a letter arrived at the Times-Picayune newspaper. It was signed by the Axeman himself. He called himself a demon from the hottest hell. He said he was not human, and then he made an offer. On the night of Tuesday, March 19th, he would pass through New Orleans, and he would not kill in any home where jazz music was playing. The city went insane. Every dance hall, every bar, every house with a piano was playing jazz that night. A composer even wrote a song called The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz. Hotels sold out. People who had never danced in their lives stood in their kitchens playing phonograph records at full volume until dawn. Nobody died that night. The killings continued afterward. The last confirmed attack was in October 1919. A woman named Mike Pipitoni was beaten to death. His wife survived, and then the axeman simply stopped. No arrest, no confession, no body with a note. He was never identified. The most credible theory today points to organized crime, the Black Hand, an Italian extortion network that preyed on immigrant business owners. But it's still a theory. More than 100 years later, nobody knows who he was. Now we go to the mountains of California, April 11th, 1981. Cabin 28 in Ketty was one of a row of small rental units on the edge of the Sierra Nevada foothills. It wasn't fancy. Sue Sharp lived there with her 5 kids. The oldest was 14. The youngest was 5. That Easter weekend, her 14-year-old daughter Sheila slept over at a neighbor's cabin. The younger kids were home. The next morning, Sheila walked back to cabin 28 and found her mother, Sue, her 15-year-old brother, John, and John's friend Dana Wingate dead in the living room. They had been bound with medical tape and electrical cord, beaten with a hammer, stabbed repeatedly with a kitchen knife. 3 of Sue's younger children, Rick, Greg, and 5-year-old Justin, were found asleep in a back bedroom, unharmed. Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina, was missing. 3 years later, in April 1984, a group of campers found a human skull and jaw fragments near a campsite 45 miles away in Feather Falls. Dental records confirmed it was Tina Sharp. The rest of her remains were never recovered. Investigators built a list of suspects over the years. The strongest was a man named Martin Smart, who had been staying in a neighboring cabin and who had reported a hammer missing the night of the murders. His ex-wife later said he had confessed to her. A second person, John Beau Boubaid, was also named. Both men are dead. Nobody was ever charged. Nobody was ever convicted. The Keddy cabin itself was demolished in 2004. If the Keddy murders are a case of violence that left questions behind, the next story is something else entirely. It's a case of violence that was systematic, engineered, and almost invisible until it was too late. Herman Webster Mudgett was born in 1861 in New Hampshire. He was intelligent, charming, and obsessed with death from an early age. By his own later account, neighborhood boys held him down and forced him to touch a skeleton at a doctor's office when he was a child. He said it didn't frighten him. He said it fascinated him. He became a doctor. He became a con artist. He became H. Holmes. By the early 1890s, Holmes was living in Chicago and preparing for something ambitious. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition was coming to the city. The event that would draw 27 million visitors to Chicago over 6 months. Holmes bought a lot on 63rd Street, just a few blocks from the fairgrounds, and began construction on a 3-story building he called the World's Fair Hotel. He fired construction crews constantly, hiring new ones before anyone could understand the full layout of the building. The result was a structure that made no conventional sense. Gas pipes ran into sealed guest rooms with no outlets. Doors opened onto brick walls. There were trapdoors, chutes, hidden passages, and a greased pole that dropped straight down to the basement. In the basement, Holmes had installed a kiln large enough to cremate a human body, a dissection table, vats of acid. He had accounts with medical schools and skeleton articulation services. He lured women primarily, secretaries, hotel employees, women he met through insurance schemes and personal ads. Some were insured with Holmes as the beneficiary before they disappeared. Some were guests who checked in and never checked out. Some were employees whose paperwork simply stopped. Holmes was eventually caught not for murder but for insurance fraud, a horse scheme in Texas. While investigating, authorities traced his movements and began excavating the Chicago building. What they found over the weeks that followed was described by the chief investigator as the most horrifying thing he had ever seen. Holmes confessed to 27 murders. Investigators believe the real number was significantly higher. Some estimates reach over 200, though this is disputed. He was hanged in Philadelphia on May 7, 1896. He reportedly smiled on the scaffold. From one of history's most prolific killers to a case where we don't even know the victim's name. December 1st, 1948, Somerton Beach, Adelaide, Australia. A well-dressed man was found dead on the sand, leaning against a seawall. No signs of trauma, no identification. The labels had been carefully removed from every piece of clothing he was wearing. Police ran his fingerprints. No match anywhere in the world. An autopsy found he was in excellent physical condition, athletic build, calves consistent with a ballet dancer or someone who walked on the balls of his feet regularly. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the pathologist noted the blood chemistry was unusual, consistent with poisoning by a substance that had already metabolized. For months, investigators had nothing. Then in January 1949, a suitcase was found at the Adelaide train station, unclaimed since the day the man died. Inside, more clothes with removed labels, a reel of orange wax thread, unusual to Australia, a small tool used to sharpen knives, and a type of American-made comb not sold in Australia. In a hidden fob pocket sewn into the dead man's trousers, investigators found a tiny rolled-up piece of paper. On it, 2 words, Tamam Shud, Persian for "it is ended" or "it is finished." The phrase comes from the final page of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of 12th century poetry. Police appealed to the public. A man came forward with a copy of the Rubaiyat he said had been thrown into his car sometime around the man's death. On the back page, the last 2 words had been torn out. On the inside back cover were 5 lines of handwritten letters in no known language, possibly a one-time cipher pad encryption. Despite decades of cryptanalysis by professionals and amateurs alike, the code has never been broken. The man's identity has never been confirmed. DNA analysis in 2022 suggested possible Scandinavian heritage and narrowed the gene pool, but no match has been found. The Somerton man remains one of the most mysterious, unidentified bodies in modern history. Our last case is the most recent, and in some ways the most disturbing because it should have been solved immediately. February 13th, 2017, Delphi, Indiana, population about 3,000, Abigail Williams, 13, and Liberty German, 14, were dropped off at the Monon High Bridge Trail around 1:30 in the afternoon. They planned to hike, take photos, and be picked up a couple of hours later. They never arrived at the pickup point. The next morning, their bodies were found in a wooded area near Deer Creek, less than half a mile from where they were last seen. Both had been murdered. The details of exactly how they died have never been fully released by investigators, but what was released changed everything about the case and made it one of the most widely followed unsolved murders in American history. Liberty German had her phone out on the trail. She had filmed the man following them. The footage showed a heavy-set middle-aged man in jeans and a blue jacket walking on the bridge toward them. It was shaky and partial, but it existed. And on the audio, a voice, low, flat, deliberate, could be heard saying 2 words, "down the hill." Police released the image and the audio clip in February 2017. Tips poured in. For 6 years, the case went nowhere publicly. Then in October 2022, Indiana State Police arrested a 50-year-old man named Richard Allen, a CVS pharmacy employee who lived less than a mile from the trailhead. He'd been interviewed by police shortly after the murders and had admitted to being on the trail that day. He said he had seen the girls. Allen was charged with 2 counts of murder. His trial began in 2024. The proceedings were marked by extraordinary legal chaos, multiple attorneys, gag orders, allegations of evidence mishandling, and attempts by the defense to introduce alternative suspects, including a neo-pagan cult theory that courts largely dismissed. In October 2024, Richard Allen was convicted of both murders and sentenced to 130 years in prison. His attorneys have filed appeals. The case is not over. But for the families of Abby Williams and Libby German, the verdict was something. Not everything, but something. 5 cases. A jazz-loving demon who walked free. A family torn apart in a cabin while the children slept. A doctor who built a killing machine and smiled at his own hanging. A dead man with no name and a code no one can crack. And 2 girls on a trail, one of whom made sure the world saw his face. If you want more cases like these, subscribe. We cover true crime, history, and the stories that don't have clean endings every single week. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Because some of these stories are still happening right now.